What you know good, Bad Things family? This week we talk about someone who might have been evil, or maybe just kind of smart, or maybe kind of just privileged. We'll let you decide. Stick around to find out all about the Witch of Wall Street. Warren Buffett is widely regarded as a financial genius. He made a fortune of over $72 billion mostly by buying stocks and selling them for a profit. Buffett accomplished that achievement by following a philosophy known as value investing. But it didn't start with him. The first person to make incredible amounts of wealth from value investing was a woman named Hetty Green. Henrietta Howland Robinson, who was called Hetty for most of her life, was born in New Bedford, Massachusetts in 1834. Her parents, Edward Mott Robinson and Abby Howland, owned a large whaling fleet and also traded goods with China. Both sides of Hetty's family had been wealthy for generations. Whaling fleets were everywhere in the early 1800s. They would seek out whales and brutally kill them. The crew would drive harpoons into the whale until it was dead. Next, they would strip flesh from the carcass and boil it, capturing the oils which emerged. The processed whale parts were then used to make a variety of products, such as corsets, umbrellas, soap, and lamp oil. Hetty's family acquired most of their wealth by meeting this demand. At the age of 2, Hetty was sent away to live with their grandfather Gideon Howland and her Aunt Sylvia. As soon as Hetty was able, she would sit with her grandfather and read the stock quotes and business reports. As a young child, she learned how he managed his business and investments. She otherwise had a typical childhood for a wealthy woman of the time. Hetty went to boarding school, then had some additional education at a religious school, finally ending her education at a finishing school. It was important for upper-class women to have proper manners and behavior. Finishing school is where they would go to learn these skills before trying to acquire a husband. Hetty's skill with numbers may not have been an important skill for women to learn when trying to get a husband, but it was great for making money. After her grandfather died, Hetty's family realized this and made her the family bookkeeper at 13 years old. Hetty's father brought her along to his meetings as well so she could continue to learn how the businesses were managed. Hetty's mother, Abby, died in 1860 at the age of 51. Hetty was in her mid-20s at this point. Abby's $100,000 estate went to Hetty's father, except for an $8,000 house that was left to Hetty. The house would be worth around $228,000 today. Edward sold family holdings in the whaling fleet and invested everything in a shipping firm run by William Tell Coleman. Hetty's family certainly had a talent for investing, but morality was not one of their strongest attributes. Coleman was a safe investment because he essentially owned all of the shipping in San Francisco. The way he acquired that control was by participating in a vigilante movement in the early 1850s. The Committee of Vigilance, with Coleman at its head, ejected the sitting government. They held secret trials and lynchings until finally handing power over to a new political party that eventually merged with the Republican Party. Coleman's connections allowed him to profit far more than most once political order was restored. And in turn, he helped Hetty's family prosper by growing their wealth. In 1865, Hetty lost her father also. Edward left Hetty $6 million, which is equivalent to $100 million today. She was given $919,000 in cash, but the rest was in a trust fund that she couldn't access, so Hetty could only use the interest from her inheritance. Aunt Sylvia also died a few months after Edward. Sylvia had a $2 million estate, worth about $33 million today. Half of it was left to charities and various other entities, and the other half was put in trust funds that Hetty, again, could not touch. She was entitled to the interest, but not the principal. Hetty's reaction to Sylvia's will was the first time her lifelong obsession concerning money became visible to everyone. Hetty challenged the validity of Sylvia's will in court. Hetty produced an earlier will made in 1862 which left everything to her. There was also the addition of a second page with a clause that invalidated any future wills. The subsequent court case, Robinson v. Mandel, made legal history in 1868. It was the first time that forensic mathematics was used in a trial. Benjamin Peirce was a mathematician who taught at Harvard for about 50 years. He and his son, Charles Peirce, took 42 examples of Sylvia Howland's signatures and compared the downstrokes on them. Benjamin found that, on average, between any two signatures, only 1 in 5 downstrokes matched. When he compared the first page of the will Hetty provided to the second page, 30 of the downstrokes matched. This meant that Hetty added a page to an old will, and she copied the signatures from the first page exactly by tracing it. The court did rule against Hetty, but the court did not mention the forgery in its decision. It said that Hetty's testimony stating that Sylvia signed the will was inadmissible because Hetty was also a beneficiary of the will. Hetty did not accept defeat. She continued challenging Sylvia's will in court and eventually was able to acquire a $600,000 settlement, which would be worth around $12 million today. The ruthless and potentially criminal reaction to Sylvia's will appeared to be an act of pure greed. Hetty did not need the principal of the estates left by her family, as her ability to generate wealth would demonstrate. Soon after the trial ended, she made a profit of $1.2 million the next year just from investing the interest earned from her trust funds. In 1867, before the trial, Hetty met the man she would marry, Edward Henry Green. He was from a wealthy Vermont family. Wealth was a prerequisite, as Hetty would not consider any man who might be after her money. Normally in the 1800s, when a woman was married, her husband controlled everything, including the finances. But Edward was never going to touch Hetty's money. Hetty's father left a stipulation in his will that no husband could inherit what he left to his daughter. Furthermore, Hetty made Edward renounce all rights to her money before the wedding. After the trial ended, Hetty's cousins attempted to have her indicted for forgery. So Edward and Hetty moved to London and lived there for many years. They had 2 children while living there. Ned was born in 1868 and Sylvia in 1871. When it appeared that an indictment wouldn't happen, they returned to New York in 1873. Unlike Hetty, Edward was not very good with money. In 1875, Hetty had to cover his losses associated with banks in London and San Francisco. She financially rescued him again in 1884. Finally, a bank collapse in 1885 was the end of her patience. Edward was a partner in a financial house and was in debt $700,000 to them. Hetty's assets represented $500,000 of their holdings. They would not let Hetty transfer her holdings to another bank until Edward's debt was paid. Hetty never forgave Edward and left him, although they would reunite again at the end of Edward's life. Hetty was notoriously thrifty. She lived in boarding houses, apartments, or hotels. Pretty much wherever was cheapest for her and the children. She didn't want to pay for an office, so did much of her business at a bank in New York. Hetty would sit surrounded by papers and trunks full of papers. Because of the simple, dark-colored dress she always wore, and her ability for making money, Hetty became known as the Witch of Wall Street. There were numerous tales about Hetty's thriftiness. Supposedly, she would never turn on the heat or use hot water. She wore one black dress and undergarments that she only changed after they were worn out. Hetty did not waste water by washing her hands. Her diet consisted mostly of cheap pies that cost 15 cents apiece. Supposedly, Hetty once spent half a night searching a carriage for a 2-cent stamp she lost. In one case, her son Ned broke his leg. She took him to the hospital commonly used by the poor and downtrodden before finally seeking medical assistance elsewhere. The damage never healed correctly, and Ned had to have the leg amputated later in life. Hetty did not just deny medical care to her children. In old age, Hetty developed a hernia. Rather than have an operation to fix it, she just pushed the swelling part down with a stick when it annoyed her. Despite extreme thriftiness in her personal life, Hetty Green was undoubtedly a shrewd investor. She made a lot of her early fortune by investing in Civil War bonds and railroad stocks. She also made a very handsome profit from buying greenbacks. During the Civil War, the U.S. government issued currency notes that were called greenbacks. These were considered valid currency, but were not backed by gold. Prior to the 20th century, any currency not backed by gold didn't maintain a high value. Hetty had watched her father buy greenbacks, and so she did the same. She would buy large amounts of them at discounted prices and hold on to them. In 1875, the U.S. government passed legislation backing them with gold. Greenbacks suddenly increased in value, and Hetty's fortune grew immensely as a result. She also acquired several mortgages. Hetty was known to travel alone into places most would consider unsafe just to collect on loan payments of a few $100s. If somebody owed her $1, Hetty was going to collect no matter what. There were numerous financial crashes in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Hetty, since she had the wealth to do so, would buy stocks and properties when values were low and hold them until they were valuable again. She usually sold holdings years later for incredible profit, and Hetty did not borrow money for her investments. She avoided debt like a plague. New York City encountered financial hardships during the financial panic of 1907. They had to ask Hetty for a loan to help keep the city afloat. She gave them $1.1 million in exchange for short-term revenue bonds. Basically, in order to get a loan from Hetty, the city had to pay her back quickly and with a lot of interest. Hetty was happy to share her philosophy when anyone bothered to ask. Here are a few words of advice she left behind. I buy when things are low and nobody wants them. I keep them until they go up and people are crazy to get them. That is, I believe, the secret of all successful business. Before deciding on an investment, I seek out every kind of information about it. In business, generally, don't close a bargain until you have reflected on it overnight. I don't think society means what some rich people would have us believe. I should get very tired of living in one of the great houses in New York, going out all night and sleeping all day. They don't have any real pleasure. Hetty died at the age of 81 while living with her son Ned. She died of internal bleeding and suffered numerous strokes before that. Supposedly, right before her death, she argued with a maid over the virtues of skim milk. Hetty was buried near her husband. The fortune she left behind was valued at $100 to $2 million, though the exact value isn't known. That would be equivalent to $2.4 billion to $4.7 billion today. Hetty Green was undoubtedly the richest woman in the world at the time she lived. So, why isn't Hetty mentioned along with the other wealthy elites of the Gilded Age, such as Rockefeller and Carnegie? Partially, it's because she did not build her wealth like they did. They made their fortune by building industry, whereas Hetty simply invested wisely by buying low and selling high. Collis P. Huntington, who built the Central Pacific Railroad, was a sworn enemy of Hetty. He said she was nothing more than a glorified pawnbroker. Opinions about her, depending on who you asked, said she was either a genius at investing or a ruthless loan shark. Of course, the fact she was a woman also contributed to the resentment she encountered. After Hetty's death, Ned explained that Hetty was actually very charitable. She just didn't discuss it in public. There were numerous charities that received donations from Hetty. Also, at least 30 different families were living on incomes she provided. Despite being thrifty in her personal life, she was quite generous to others in need. The life of Hetty Green is interesting and raises several questions. She came from a wealthy family and was taught how to invest at an early age. But Hetty also used investment strategies in a new and interesting way. Was she a natural-born financial genius? Or was she just another wealthy elite who had the privilege of using wealth to acquire even more wealth? And what about using forgery to try and claim all of Aunt Sylvia's estate? Was Hetty unreasonably greedy? Or does the charitable work she performed later in life make up for forging a fake will? Now, what do you think about Hetty Green? Let us know in the comments. And, as always, thanks for watching Bad Things in History.